On the 15th of December 1900, a steamer going by the name of Arctur noticed that the nearby lighthouse had not been operational even in the bad weather. This was very unprofessional and surprising. Hence, this info was passed to the Northern Lighthouse Board 3 days later, which prompted a relief vessel, Hesperus, to be sent 2 days later on 20th of December, but reached the island not before 26th due to previously said bad weather. On the vessel was Joseph Moore, one of the lighthouse men who was to be in charge of the lighthouse after one of the 3 men currently in charge would leave. But the worrying signs were that something was badly wrong in this little island. There had been no activity at the lighthouse. The flag was not hoisted. As the Hesperus hove into view, it sounded a blast on her steam whistle, and the rocket fired from the tender to announce her arrival. All signs had gone unanswered. Finding this unsettling, Joseph Moore departed on the island and headed towards the lighthouse, alone. Emerging at the top of the steps, the lighthouse man could see ahead of him the ruins of an ancient chapel, and beyond that, the bulk of the new stone-built lighthouse itself. But there were no signs of life. No men advancing down the slope to greet him, even though the recent bad weather meant that relief was overdue. Increasingly anxious now, Moore went over to the living quarters. The entrance gate was closed. When the man went inside, he found the entrance door leading to the kitchen and storeroom closed too, but the kitchen door itself was open. On entering, he found that the fireplace seemed unlit for days, and the clocks had all stopped working. After scouring through the rooms, he found that the beds were empty, just as they left him in early morning. At this point, Moore knew there was something seriously wrong, and called his crewmates from the Hesperus to help him. What he and his men would uncover in the following days would go down in history as the infamous disappearance of the Flannan Isles lighthouse man. We are talking about the Flannan Isles lighthouse, which is located on Isle and Moor, one of the 7 Flannan Islands in the Outer Hebrides off the west coast of Scotland. The lighthouse was built in 1899 by the UK and is 23 meters high. Along with the lighthouse, there are some small huts called bothies and the chapel, all in ruins. There are also 2 roads which lead to the West Landing and East Landing, which are docks for vessels visiting the island. These landings are also equipped with mechanical cranes which aid in cargo unloading. There is also a motorized trolley line which runs along the path. The island has previously been rumored with some strange occurrences, including the description by Scottish writer Martin Martin in 1695, which gave way to the idea that something supernatural was going on that island.
I had this superstitious account not only from several natives of the Lewis, but likewise from 2 who had been in the Flannan Islands the preceding year. I asked one of them if he prayed at home as often and as frequently as he did in the Flannan Islands, and he plainly confessed to me that he did not, adding further that these remote islands were places of inherent sanctity, and there was none ever yet landed in them, but found himself more disposed to devotion there than anywhere else.
Martin also stated that the island was inhabited by short-statured men, who were called Losbirden, that is, pygmies. You can learn more about these historical glimpses of the island in a document linked below in the description. There is another account being one of the disappeared lighthouse man James Ducat, who had insisted on rejecting his job on the Flannan Islands before. He said it was too dangerous and that he had a wife and 4 children depending on him. The claims by Martin probably result from the idea that these islands were very desolate and were previously inhabited by some farmers who would graze sheep in his times. Ducat's statement is also an emotional interpretation, as the island was nonetheless having a hostile weather for any permanent civilization. The lighthouse was first lit in 1900 and 4 men were assigned to it, who would work by taking turns 3 at a time for 6 months. This time, the men assigned to the lighthouse were James Ducat, age 43, was the principal keeper. He was an experienced lighthouse keeper who had been in charge of the Flannan Isles lighthouse since it was built. Thomas Marshall, aged 40, the second assistant keeper. He had been a lighthouse keeper for 4 years and had previously served in the Royal Navy. William MacArthur, aged 28, the occasional keeper. He was a substitute for the first assistant keeper who was on sick leave. He was a local fisherman and a crofter who had worked as a lighthouse keeper before. And finally, Joseph Moore, aged 37, the relief keeper. He was a substitute for the second assistant keeper who was on leave and the first to discover the disappearance. Two reports were written, one by Robert Muirhead, the superintendent in overall charge of the Flannan, and one by Joseph Moore and his crew's account. We have been discussing Moore's account, and let us continue. Moore brought with him 2 other seamen with him, and the Hesperus left and sent a telegraph to the Northern Lighthouse Board. The other crewmen too noticed that in the light room, everything was in proper order. The lamp was clean, the foundations full, blinds on the windows. Some accounts say a meal of salted mutton and boiled potatoes laid on the table, half eaten, and the chair was toppled over on the floor. Official reports state that the kitchen had been tidied after the midday meal. One of the men's coat was also still hanging. But of the keepers, there was no sign. The next day, the men searched on the island. On the east landing, everything seemed in order. However, the west landing had signs of storm damage. The men had found out that the iron railings of the trolley tramway, he wrote, quote, had started from the foundations and broken in several places, and the box containing the mooring ropes had vanished, despite having been firmly wedged to the crevice and then anchored. Later that year, Robert Muirhead conducted his own investigation by visiting the island. He confirmed the previous documentations and found more things, such as a large block of stone had been moved, and a lifebuoy had been missing, which he later realized was because of the ocean, as the ropes that held the lifebuoy did not seem to be removed by man, even though this railing was a staggering 110 feet above sea level. All of this was nonetheless noted in the previous logs in the logbook, which was also recovered. And also, this logbook has some other text which make the story more disturbing, which we will explore further in the video. Based on investigation, it was settled finally that the disappearance was likely on the 15th of December. The evidence suggests that the men vanished in the early afternoon before dark, sometime between 1 and 4 p.m. that day, as the last entry in the logbook is 1 p.m. and they followed standing orders not to be out all at once after dark, which is 4 p.m. in the region. Captain Holman, passing by at midnight on the 15th, noticed that the light was not lit, further adding weight to this theory. Despite suggestions of calm weather, an account by a Scottish newspaper, Inverness Courier, described the conditions as clear but stormy on the evening of 15 December, suggesting that weather could very well be a factor. The extensive damage discovered later may have been caused by a storm on 20th December, almost a week after the likely disappearance date. So that's it, we may conclude. Storm blew away men, tragedy on Flannan Isles due to natural disaster. Right? Then why is this such a big mystery? Well, first of all, we're talking about skilled and experienced men. How could 3 of them disappear all at once? Secondly, because of all the anomalies associated with this event, which are very intriguing to say the least, and could suggest something extraordinary could be at play. We must first address these anomalies before moving on to the theories, and this is where things get eerie. The mysterious logbook entries. Of all the strange circumstances surrounding the disappearance of the 3 lighthouse men, perhaps the most peculiar is the reputed existence of odd and even mystical entries in the station's log. Here is a logbook entry which is presumed to be written by Thomas Marshall. December 12. Gale. North by northwest. Sea lashed to fury. Storm bound 9 p.m. Never seen such a storm. Everything shipshape. Ducat irritable. 12 p.m. Storm still raging. Wind steady. Storm bound. Cannot go out. Ship past sounding foghorn. Could see lights of cabins. Ducat quiet. MacArthur crying. December 13. Storm continued through night. Wind shifted west by north. Ducat quiet. MacArthur praying. 12 noon. Grey daylight. Me, Ducat, and MacArthur prayed. December 15. 1 p.m. Storm ended. Sea calm. God is over all. Several writers like Gaddis and Michael Harrison have described these entries as very odd and disturbing. According to Gaddis,
Ducat, usually very good-natured, had just returned from his leave on shore. Why should he be irritable? MacArthur, a hardened, veteran seaman who had weathered the sea's worst blows, well known as a lusty, fearless brawler on land, crying, what could have been the mysterious, extraordinary situation that would make strong MacArthur weep?
And according to Harrison,
whatever was happening, or whatever ghastly doom seemed to be threatening, now included the lawkeeper Marshall in its menace. For on the following day, this was a solitary, brief, and sinister entry. Grey daylight. Me, Ducat, and MacArthur prayed. It was all but the last entry, and with that last mysterious entry, God is over all. Mid on 15 December, the lug closed, and the 3 terrified, praying men vanished forever from this world.
all of these writings in the logs could also have been mere effects of some psychological issue like depression. Also, the tone of these logs seemed peculiar, as using insubordinate words like irritable by Marshall to describe his senior, the principal keeper Ducat, even though he very well would have known that these logs would be read both by the Northern Lighthouse Board and Ducat himself, according to protocol. More unusual facts arise when noting the type of details given in these logs. Phrases like sea lashed to fury and the description of the other men's moods, which are irrelevant details and not to be noted in any logbook according to standard procedure. This has led some to debate around the authenticity of these log entries, which have not been settled to this date, and some even completely dismissing these entries as complete fraud. Anomaly 2. Several secondary sources report that the 3 lighthouse keepers' final meal was found half-eaten in the living quarters when Moore and his companions searched the building on 26 December. It is sometimes said that the final meal was of salted mutton and boiled potatoes. Muirhead noted, "The pots and pans have been cleaned and the kitchen tidied up," which showed that the man who acted as cook had completed his work. There are also those previously mentioned claims of one of those chairs being tipped over, but is noted neither by Moore nor Muirhead, and hence may be dismissed as fabrication. Anomaly 3. When Moore and his companions searched the lighthouse on December 26, Ducat's waterproof jacket and Marshall's oilskins were missing. Moore noted MacArthur's wearing coat still on its peg, suggesting that he went out in shirt sleeves. Unlikely in bad weather, indicating something had happened to Ducat and Marshall first. MacArthur likely ran out to aid them without wearing his coat, possibly knocking down the chair, if that's the case. What could have happened to the lighthouse keepers? Let us dive into our theories. Giant waves, high winds, violent incident, aiding a distressed vessel, ship removal, unusual theories. We must first dismiss the absurd and improbable events, as these are made on the assumption that bad weather was impossible for being the reason behind this mystery. The second theory is plausible but lacks backing, as there is no evidence of any kind of violence among the men, nor any possible object that could have been used as a weapon. And that leaves us with the most widely accepted theory. Two key questions remain. Could waves reaching 110 feet have battered Eiley and Moore in December? And if so, could they explain the simultaneous disappearance of all three lighthouse men? The answer to the first question appears to be yes. Muirhead, after examining the remains of the missing lifebuoy, found out that indeed the sea force tore it off at a height of 110 feet. And this was also supported by some remarkable research done by Walter Aldeburgh, who served as principal keeper on Eiley and Moore later between 1953 and 1957. Convinced that giant waves could account for the disappearance of his predecessors, he repeatedly took a camera out in appalling weather conditions to record the height of the largest waves striking the island, exposing 30 reels of film in total. The processed film was submitted with a report to the commissioners of the Northern Lighthouse Board. Unfortunately, no trace of them can be found in the NLB records now at the Scottish Record Office. In one incident, Aldeburgh was nearly washed off even though he was 200 feet above sea level, and even noting that the top of the lighthouse, which is 300 feet above sea level, can be sprayed with water by these waves. A coil of rope, lying on the top, and too solid to be shifted by the wind, was washed off. The water lay a foot deep and the wave receded. My pictures do not show the highest waves, but they give some idea of their immensity. Perhaps these poor fellows, being fairly new to the Flannans, did not realize the extreme danger. Is it possible, though, that all three lighthousemen could have been caught simultaneously by such a wave? And why would MacArthur have braved the storm in his shirt sleeves? Aldeburgh had a theory to explain that too. A storm is raging, and Mr. Ducat is worried about his landing ropes. Nobody goes out of a lighthouse in bad weather. But if he loses his ropes, relief may be impossible, and he must save them if he can. After dinner, the wind starts to drop, leaving the cook to wash up. He and another man put on their sea boots and coats to make their way to the west side, as there is no handrail by the railway. They come to a safety path, which has a handrail reaching the path, which runs at right angles to the stairway. And seeing the path dry, they continue towards the crane, where the box of stowing and the landing ropes is situated. Suddenly, a wave much bigger than the previous one comes in and sweeps one of the men back into the sea. Aldebaran hypothesized that the survivor, there is no means of saying who this was, then ran back up to the 45-degree track leading to the lighthouse to summon the help of MacArthur. The cook, who has just sat down after clearing the dinner, knocks his chair under him and rushes out without his coat. Grabbing a heaving line, the two men make their way back to the west side, hoping to throw the line to their unfortunate comrade. Then comes another huge wave, sweeping both men into the sea. The proposed explanation for the disappearance of the lighthouse men, knowing the men venturing out during a storm to secure landing ropes and subsequently being swept by giant waves, is considered plausible. This theory provides a neat explanation for MacArthur leaving the lighthouse without his wearing coat and aligns with known facts. Details in the account, such as MacArthur possibly knocking over a chair in haste, are seen as non-essential. Anna Ducat, the daughter of James Ducat, recalled that the keepers were previously fined for storm damage at the West Landing, suggesting they might have gone out not to save the mooring ropes, but to assess and repair storm-induced damage to avoid further fines. This theory is regarded as a workable solution to the enduring mystery of the vanished lighthouse. The few lingering uncertainties. The closed gates and doors found by Moore, despite MacArthur's supposed haste, might be explained by the force of the high winds on the 15th or 20th. The simultaneous occurrence of two successive waves sweeping three men, especially when they were forewarned, is remarkable. Yet, it may be tough to come up with a more practical solution to this century-old mystery, considering that it comes from an experienced Flannan Isles expert who risked his life to gather supporting evidence. The Flannan Isles instead continues to captivate, intrigue, inspiring countless retellings through various mediums, from the haunting verses of Wilfred Wilson Gibson's poem Flannan Isle to its portrayal in literature, film, and music. The mystery of the vanished lighthouse keepers endures as a symbol of the uncertain and harsh nature of working in such conditions. A monument has been carved on the island which pays tribute to the brave men. The lighthouse was later automated in 1971, bringing an end to the manual operation of the lighthouse and making it safe.